inviting me and giving me the opportunity. You've just reminded me that I need a new PA. I'm clearly doing too much of this on my own. But as Jeff said, I've never worked anywhere else. I've been with HSBC from being a graduate trainee. I'm in my 30th year. I've never wanted to work anywhere else. And for the last year, I've had the privilege of leading this organization. And I first met you, Jeff, just before I knew I was going to get the job. And I'd spent that previous year thinking about what I would do if I was asked to get the job. And my thinking split itself into two parts. There's the typical traditional hard strategy piece of where are we going to compete and what will we allocate capital to and what will we spend our money on. And you can get McKinsey et al. To help you with that side of it. But the aspect of the role that consumed most of my thinking and most of my energy was the human question. If I do get to lead HSBC, what am I going to do with the people agenda? What's the tone that I want to set? How can I begin to unlock some of the energy that exists inside HSBC? And what I thought I'd do today is begin to share with you what I've learned over this last year. Because a big part of the people agenda, and we can use the phrase building the healthiest human system, which is the phrase that I use internally. We can talk about mental well-being. We can talk about mental health and mental health awareness. All of those subjects are an integral part of the agenda that I'm delivering on. And I wanted to give you a leadership perspective. And my story is that. It's a story of leading, trying to mobilize a large organization to embrace this agenda and create the right environment for everybody. My personal story isn't a story of my own journey through mental health illness and then recovery, but I wanted to share the leadership perspective because one of the things I have learned in this role is when you get into these big jobs, people's perception of you changes. And there's a tendency for people to think that you don't exist in the real world anymore. So in the next 10 minutes, I'll leave you in no uncertain terms or no doubt in your mind that I exist in the real world. 6 weeks into the job, I was downstairs here at Pret buying my lunch. So the new CEO and one of my staff saw me in Pret and said, "Wow, you eat sandwiches." And it's true. I eat sandwiches. So I'm just going to share with you, if you like, 5 brief reflections on what I've learned over the last year and the leadership journey. The first is to absolutely confirm that ignorance and bias still exist when it comes to mental health. And it's not that long ago that I sat in my own kitchen and read about another bank CEO who was announcing a leave of absence for mental health reasons. And I said to my wife in the kitchen, there is no way he is coming back to that job. And I said it because that was what I thought. And it was an ignorant view. And it was a view based on an unconscious bias. We have them. And I've been proved spectacularly wrong because that person did come back well and has continues to lead his organization brilliantly. But I think we all have to recognize that this conversation is still reasonably young, and that bias and the ignorance exists. And the only way to unpack it is to do actually what you already are doing and giving this conversation oxygen. I can also share with you that it doesn't matter how big your job is or how big your title is. It can be a little bit difficult and a little bit scary engaging in conversations around mental health. So around about a year ago, just over a year ago, I was walking between the buildings here at Canary Wharf with a colleague, and they confided that they had had a mental health illness and that they'd recovered. And I knew that was a big moment, a big reveal, a moment of trust. And I navigated that conversation as best I could. And I thought I did okay, but I got back to my office and worried that I hadn't done okay. I have lots of conversations with people about physical health. Sadly, when you lead a big organization, there's too many incidents of having to sit opposite somebody and have them tell you that they're not well, they need some treatment, they've got something that they're going to have to navigate. And in the physical health side, actually, I'm good at that. I do it a lot. I do it too often, but I know that I can make the person sitting across from me feel as good as they probably can in the circumstances. But this experience was new. This was the first time I had another human being who had something important about mental health, and I was worried that I hadn't handled the conversation. So I called my sister, who is a clinical psychologist, and said, "Do you remember that?" And said, I've just started this conversation, what do I do? Now, the good news is that the advice that I got back wasn't particularly clinical. It was reassuring and had an awful lot of common sense, but it was really helpful for me to just have a professional opinion that says, no, you're handling this in the right way. And that conversation actually has led to a much deeper conversation around mental health and has gone a long way to shaping the agenda that we're now beginning to unpack inside HSBC. So again, it doesn't matter how senior you are, I think it's okay to recognize that these conversations can be a little bit frightening for the right reasons. Now, HSBC, some of you work among the HSBC family, some of you will have heard about us. We are a large, old, proud organization with a very, very strong culture. And it's very hierarchical. And the nice thing about a hierarchical organization is, particularly in my new role, if I speak, people get to listen. So the most important thing I've done with respect to the mental health agenda so far has been to record a 10-minute video with one of my colleagues, who many of you will know, Brian Hayworth. And the star of the video was Brian. Brian has his own story, and he's happy to talk about it. Brian's actually very, very happy to talk about himself in most circumstances. I can say that because he's not here. But I wanted to host the conversation and show it to the organization because I wanted the organization to know that I thought this subject was worthy of my time and my attention. And between the two of us, we pulled this off. Brian's story is wonderful. You can't not be moved by it. And he's got a very big role, so it's another great example of somebody coming through something difficult, coming out the other side and carrying very significant responsibilities. And it took an hour to do, an hour of our time, and the impact that it's had through the organization has been fantastic. We've both received lots and lots of feedback. Interestingly, most of it from the UK. We're in 66 countries, so as wonderful as the conversation appears to be in the UK, my goodness, this conversation needs to travel quickly, certainly within HSBC outside of the UK. But we had wonderful messages from people, sometimes just saying thank you for giving this some airtime, all the way through to people saying, okay, I can now tell you, and they'll tell you their story. I can now tell you the reason that I've been taking Fridays off to get my back fixed is actually nothing wrong with my back. I've been dealing with something else and I'll talk to you about it, or I've recovered from. So a lot of coming out moments for staff. And if the lifeboat analogy, I think, rings for me really true, people, once they start to tell their stories, will encourage others to do it. So from a leadership perspective, lending your voice and signaling to the organization that you want to be part of this conversation and that you give permission for this conversation, certainly within HSBC has been very powerful. Those of you who do lead, if you haven't done it yet, I'd encourage you to do it. You will be rewarded handsomely by the feedback you get. Those of you who work in organizations where your leaders haven't done it yet, tell them that John told you to get on with it, with my permission. So the leadership role and putting energy into the conversation is important. I've had one slight frustration with this that I did want to share in this room. And in preparation for this, I'd had a little bit of feedback around the way I was speaking about mental health and the vocabulary I was using. And in particular, I'd said in my video with Brian, so far, I have been very lucky to have enjoyed good physical and mental health. And I've been cautioned against saying that. And I absolutely understand now it's been explained to me why that might be not a very inclusive thing to say. But what I would say to everybody involved in curating this conversation is please don't try and control the narrative on this too quickly, because it excludes people. When I was told that, I didn't feel very good about coming here tonight and trying to talk about mental health. Look, I'm a banker, right? I have no basis on which to be talking to any of you about mental health. I'm talking to you about the challenge of leadership. And I've experienced this actually when we've got into other inclusion type initiatives, that sometimes people get very precious about the lexicon and the way we talk about things. And what I would say at this stage is, for people who are stepping into it, please don't do that, because you want to encourage them to keep having the conversation, and I want to keep having the conversation. Now, as a result, my final comment before I let Jeff ask me some difficult questions. My final comment, my final reflection on having spent time and energy on this over the last year is this. I've had the privilege of spending time with people who have been unwell, people who've grappled with real mental health issues and have either recovered or are still recovering. And what I can absolutely assure you is that HSBC is a much healthier and happier place because we have people like that amongst the family. In my experience, people who've suffered mental health issues have a resourcefulness and a resilience that many of the rest of us don't actually comprehend. They have a natural empathy and EQ that, again, the average person in our family probably doesn't enjoy. And they have insights into people and people dynamics that are really helpful if you sit back and listen, because they've become attuned to it either for themselves or for the people that they care for. So my objective as we build the healthiest human system is not to purify HSBC or to try and eradicate bad mental health. It's a ridiculous objective. Life is not a straight line. It throws speed bumps at you. And to date, if I think I've been fortunate, I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. But I absolutely do want to create an organization where we can cope well with all aspects of mental health, and we can make people who work at HSBC feel that they're supported and they're in an environment where they can thrive. We're a better place because we've got people within HSBC who've had some difficult times for all the reasons that I've just mentioned. So I'll leave you with that thought. Jeff, happy to take any questions.
When I asked John to do this, he said, absolutely yes, I'll come and do it. And then what happened was his favorite artist happened to be in town. And there's a family event tonight, and his favorite artist is in town, and he wanted to take his family to his favorite artist. But instead, he made sure that he would make his commitment to be with us this evening. So if you've got any questions, then please throw them at us. But maybe the question that I would like to ask you, John, is, and this is, just thinking about my own experience in a global organization and this issue, is how do you think we do get this conversation going across the different cultures? So like you said, in the UK, we kind of, we're living off something. How do you think we get it going in a China or an India or a Brazil?
Well, I think you need to leverage an organization like ours where we've got a vested interest in being the catalyst in some of these markets. I mean, I don't think any of us pretend for a moment that because the conversation is louder here, it's because Britain's got a bigger mental health problem than the other countries we serve. In fact, my kind of untrained observation would be that's probably the wrong way round. So I think we just have to leverage organizations that are connected and try and find a local catalyst. And that conversation has to be a local conversation. It's not, I have a long experience of exporting agendas from one part of the world to another, exporting best practice. And if you ignore the local cultural norms, you can come unstuck very, very quickly. But underneath all that, human beings are human beings, and the need for the conversation, I think, is clear. So I think leverage, your host tonight, Moody's, are in XD countries, all the organizations represented by the people here. There'll be enough catalysts, I think, to get this going.
Is there anybody from the audience who might have a question for John? Yes, Rob. There's a mic coming to you.
John, thank you for your talk there. It was amazing. In an organisation like HSBC, when you've got 250,000 plus people globally, and you're looking to improve the mental health and well-being across, that scale of organisation, how do you take on that challenge? How do you work out in different parts of the business what is going to work and what is not going to work, across global and across different service lines?
Right. It's a great question, and that's probably the question that is consuming a lot of energy inside HSBC now, because I told the organisation on my first day, the 21st of February, that I would build the healthiest human system in the financial services industry, which, by the way, is a pretty low bar because our industry is terrible at this stuff. But I thought we'd start with that. And then in the middle of the year, I moved from it being my ambition to being an invitation to leadership. So my expectation is, if you have a leadership role in HSBC, and clearly there are many, many hundreds of leaders, not just managers, but people with real leadership roles, my expectation is that they figure this out for themselves. This isn't ever going to be a framework from me or a checklist from me. We are too complex for that. I expect a leader to be able to diagnose their human problem, their human challenge. Our businesses are very diverse by geography, by race, by culture, by state of the business. We've got businesses in great shape. We've got businesses that are struggling very badly. A good leader should be able to diagnose for themselves and use the tools available to them to begin to create an environment. We've learned a lot. I've learned a lot in the last year. One of the things that one of my colleagues reminds me on a regular basis is nobody likes to be told what to do. If people discover it for themselves, they figure out that they want to do it. So I'm trying to democratize the leadership challenge here by inviting people to step up and lead. Now, so far, there is a lot of energy for this. There are some leaders that are off and running. Some people feel they've been given permission. They're loving it. Some people are nervous. They don't quite know where to go. There's a really small portion that are cynical, and I'm ignoring them. They're not getting any of my attention or energy, apart from having just spoken about them now, which I won't do again. So yeah, it's because we're so big and diverse, I can't do this from London, even with all the travel I do. I'm expecting hundreds of leaders to figure this out. A year from now, if 70% of what they've done has gone well and they've learned something, fantastic. If 30% of what they've done has failed, fine, try again, move on. Thanks.
John, when you became CEO, there were all sorts of agendas that you could have decided on as the CEO of the business. There are all sorts of issues out there, whether it's climate change, whether it's plastics, whether it's whatever, whether it's gender pay gap. There are all sorts of issues. Why did you choose this? Why did you choose to go with this line of trying to create the healthiest human system?
Because it's what HSBC needs now. So, I've seen HSBC at its best and at its worst. The best was probably the 5 years before and through the crisis. We had a great crisis. The worst has been the last 6 or 7 years when we've had regulatory and legal and compliance issues that we've had to work through. And I inherited an organization that had been brilliantly led by my predecessor and restructured in a very fundamental way by my predecessor. But I inherited an organization that was a bit tired and a bit beat up. And I reflect on our first conversation. I wanted to get the energy in HSBC up. This was a proud organization that does great things. Finding a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose inside HSBC shouldn't be difficult, right? We've got everything we need to be able to create some positive energy. It was very clear to me that if we were going to fulfill our potential as a commercial organization, we had to get the energy moving inside HSBC, and it was sad. It was sad to travel around the place and recognize that people were fatigued, people were tired, people were afraid. Fear is a really corrosive thing, and our industries had to go through a lot. Maybe some fear was required to effect some of the change, maybe. But it's not a healthy way to build or grow a business. So we had to get rid of it from the system. So that's why it was just, maybe it's because I've grown up here and I'm a lifer at HSBC. It was very clear to me this was the biggest single opportunity. And I don't like to talk about legacy because I don't think I'm old enough to talk about legacy. But when I have finished, I really, really hope that's what people reflect on. The human system was in a particular condition when I took the role on, and it was in a much better condition when and it's a big ambition, but and it's a big ambition, and the ambition of creating the healthiest. If you're going to do this, and I do argue with friends around this, healthy is great. It's not good enough. This is the basis on which we should be competing with the other banks. We want to be better than them at this.
I'm going to take one more question. Gee, that's hard. Karen, can I take? Yeah, I know Karen very well, so she'll forgive me. Yes. Victoria. No, there's Karen. That's Karen who had her hand up.
I was looking very blank then. Thank you for speaking today. I'm from an organisation called Mindful Community, and I go into organisations and deliver wellbeing. And one of the things that I come up against is large organisations not allocating budgets. So they have this really great strategy, and there's the talk of mental health and wellbeing and enabling their employees to be well in the workplace. But like anything, we need the budget. So what would your message be to larger organisations who, do have budgets and they should be spending money like this on their employees?
Yeah, I mean, there's no issue about the amount of money that we spend. We spend $34 billion a year running HSBC. So how we choose to spend it is absolutely up to us. It's a question of building the case, and the case will come from elevating the conversation around mental health in its broadest sense, and making sure that you've got senior advocates for it. I don't ever let budgets be for a large commercial organisation, particularly in financial services. Don't ever let budget be a constraint or a reason why we can't do things. The money's there; it's a choice. We'll be choosing to spend money on something else. The financial services industry, in particular, is obsessed with dollar reward, over things like recognition and care. So I think there's an open door to push on if you, certainly in financial services, if you push hard enough. And if you think I can help in any way, post the conversation, let me know.
So John, I want you to go and have an enjoyable evening with your family.
Me too.
I'd like to just on behalf of everybody here say a very big thank you to you. I want to say a thank you to HSBC. Our first story event, Brian Hayworth came and told his story.
Yeah, great.
And ever since that day, HSBC has been a wonderful supporter of Minds at Work. You've hosted a couple of our events. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming.